a real honor and privilege to be here. And I wish I could report to you that that everything is moving the right direction in defense of life, and that's not always the case down at the Capitol. As a matter of fact, you know, I have to ask myself so many times, why are we here in the first place? Why is it such a requirement to stand up for what seems so self-evident? Why does not our nation and our state's laws protect the most innocent among us? What is the problem? I've asked myself that many times because in my dozen-plus years now at the Capitol, and indeed during my entire adult life, Roe v. Wade has been a reality, and here in Colorado, it was 6 years before that the first modern-day bill or law allowing abortion was passed and signed in Colorado. And I've often asked myself, how could this be? How could people do this? And I want to talk on that for just a little bit. I'll get to where we're at today a little bit further down my talk here. But I wanted to start with what I've seen down there. As I say, it was in 1967 that the first law that really allowed abortions to occur in this country happened here. And on the 40th anniversary of that, back in 2007, I wanted to dig a little deeper and figure out what did happen. Actually, I'm a Republican. We call ourselves pro-life most often today, but not back then. It was passed, it's true, it was then State Representative Dick Lamb who carried the bill in the House, but then it was a Republican who carried it in the Senate, and it was a Republican governor who signed it, John Long. It's not a partisan issue. It's much deeper than that. And so anyway, as I say, I went back into the archives to just see who was there, how did they vote. And I saw in the Senate a couple of names that I recognized, people I knew and knew were still with us. And so I called them and I asked them, and here was the circumstance. One was a gentleman who had actually signed on as a co-sponsor for the bill. But he voted against it, had his name removed as a co-sponsor, which is a very big step to take. If you agree to be a co-sponsor, pretty much you're locked in. That's what you're going to do. The other one simply voted for the bill. So I called them, asked them both, do you remember much about this? And of course they do remember the fact that that law occurred and that they were there and that they did cast their vote. But both of them told me the same thing. They said, we had no idea what we were doing. We had no concept of what this was. And now both of them are committed pro-life believers today. Actually, one of them is the president of Colorado Christian University. And yet, he admitted he had no idea what it was. Well, I kind of kept that in the back of my mind whenever I encountered any life issue. And an issue concerning life, so often, because the big problem is the wholesale abortions that occur in this country, but there are other aspects of the question of life in law that we see as well. Most recently, of course, there was the bill that was in the House concerning doctor-assisted suicide. Some people call that death with dignity. I call it the rape-kill bill, because really it was authorizing a doctor to prescribe a lethal dose of a prescription drug, and essentially requiring a pharmacist to dispense that drug. Now, I'm told that there was an opt-out there, but I'm not sure that every pharmacist's company or boss will allow that, because that is the case for many abortifacients as well. Sure, you don't have to dispense it, you can quit your job. But that bill, after long, long hours of testimony in the House, was killed. And that's good. That's good. But you know, I kind of think it still isn't that well understood. Because to me, it was just so self-evident. I was in college when Roe v. Wade was decided upon. And it seemed obvious to me that we're talking about children. We're talking about killing children. It's even hard to talk about, just to express the words, because it's so contrary to God's moral values that we should know about. Even, the Apostle Paul spoke of even creation, tells us of his magnificence and his glory and his grace and his mercy. How can we not understand that when it comes to a small child? But I've observed through the years, as issues come and go, that I'm always starting from the basic point when I'm discussing this with anyone who doesn't quite get it. And I recall a couple of years ago, I was speaking to a group of retired people so they're mostly grandparents, okay, that's why I'm putting it in context there. And I was running for office, and I told them I am pro-life, 100% pro-life. And somebody said, why do you waste our time on that? Why do you make that an issue? Don't you know you just need to move on and go to some other issue? And I remember for that group, I looked around and I saw the age set I was talking to, and I said, well, how many of you have ever seen your grandchild in a sonogram? Maybe even pinned it to the refrigerator door. And I slowly saw through the audience a whole lot of, nods of recognition and realization that we were talking about children. In that case, their grandchildren. I see the big, what do we call that, a van or a bus or mobile ultrasound. You know what I'm talking about. Why is that such a wonderful tool? Because that makes people see what we're talking about. That tells the mom, maybe tells the dad, or the friend, the parent, this is a child. Can we do nothing less than protect that child first and foremost? But I just don't see that much of that down at the Capitol. There was a bill in the House that I believe it was Representative Humphrey ran. He has for several years. I was the Senate sponsor, but I wasn't bracing for much discussion because I knew what was going to happen, and it did. Took it to a committee and ended that bill. Actually, I have one in the Senate right now that is not calendared for action yet, but it's concerning limiting abortions for the unborn that can feel pain, which to me seems, you might say, doubly obvious, but I'm pretty sure where that bill will finally end up. I believe we need to continue to keep going and keep reminding people, because for some reason it just doesn't register. It is more. If you look at some of the polling of different age groups and what their attitude is towards right, you find that among younger generations, that they are starting to sort this out. And I believe that's because a lot of their younger brothers and sisters were first seen on that refrigerator door in that sonogram. And I've seen something else too. When I started in my political efforts, oftentimes I would get stopped when I would say the unborn baby, and they'd say, no, this isn't a baby. No one does that anymore. At least they don't stop me at that point. They, at some level, are starting to accept the fact that we are talking about people. But it's still not enough to really understand the intrinsic value, the God-given value of human life. And that's something we can't give, that's something we can't take away, that's something God imbued upon every unique individual that's formed. I trust that as we look at this issue of life in more depth today, that you'll understand that it's going to take well, let me tell you, this is kind of an aside, but not really. I was talking to a gentleman a few years ago. I actually made reference to him because he was one of those two who made that vote. And he went on to serve in the U.S. Senate, and he was telling me about U.S. senators. He said they are wonderful people. They'll do anything you ask them. All you have to do is tell them 7 times. And that's because they're busy people. And you maybe don't get their attention. You maybe don't make the point. You maybe don't drill down to their real comprehension that first time. And I believe that's what's before us as a challenge among our neighbors, among our family, our friends, in the public square, wherever you find yourself. Stand up for life. Stand up for defending life and for defining life, for explaining it again and again and again, for understanding it. You know, we've got a bill that is coming up, which is to provide an extra $5 million for, what do they call them? Long-term contraceptives. That's shorthand for an IUD, which they're trying to convince us is not abortifacient. Well, I've dug into this pretty deeply, and it just isn't so. It can have either effect, I'll grant, but if it has a significant possibility of ending that child's life, that's where I draw the line. And there can, you know, I know there are different theological views on where, you know, whether contraceptives are appropriate or not. But on that point of abortifacient, they're trying to tell us that this isn't so, but it is. And they're trying to get us to spend $5 million of state funds to provide this, despite the fact that the state constitution, in Article 5, Section 50, says no state funds shall be used directly or indirectly for abortions. So, I don't know how many reporters I've had to sit down and actually kind of spell this out in very particular detail. And I know I'm going to have to keep doing it, but you're going to have to keep reminding people as well, and working on this again and again and again. I do see, as I say, some progress, and I do see some successes, like for the assisted suicide bill. But I also see a real challenge for all of us, and you know, I'll simply leave you with the words of Winston Churchill that it's very easy to memorize this speech. Never, 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 never give up.
No.
May God allow us to never give up. Thank you. I was told there might be some questions. Might be some answers. I don't know. Yes, sir.
You said in our Constitution, no money goes to abortion, and yet we're not just reading an article about the amounts of millions of Planned Parenthood just recently got from Colorado taxpayers.
Actually, I'd like you to point that out to me. I don't think that's the case. And when it comes to Planned Parenthood getting state funds, now understand that's a state constitution just dealing with state funds. But at first, actually I'll tell you a story about that a little bit, because that was a measure that was passed by a citizens initiative back in, it was the early 80s, 84, somewhere in there, maybe 82, one of those 2 dates. And I remember that during the debate before the election, all of the opponents of this measure were running around the state saying the hospitals are going to close down. The whole medical system is going to implode. And then Governor Dick Lamb was leading the charge on that, talking about how terrible this was going to be if this actually passed. Well, it did pass. And I remember this almost like it was yesterday. Governor Lamb was being interviewed by one of the Denver TV reporters and saying, well, Governor, it looks like this is going to become law. What's going to happen to the hospitals? And his answer was immediate, and he said, nothing. Nothing will occur. And he was correct, because he did nothing. And his successor did nothing. And then the third one in line, Governor Bill Owens, it took him 4 years, but he finally did something, and he drew the line and said, okay, we're not going to be providing any funds to Planned Parenthood, sort of. And they worked out a little deal where Planned Parenthood had sort of a double bookkeeping system, and any dollars that they received would not be, from the state, would not be headed towards the abortion side. I think that's indirect funding, nonetheless. And then finally, they kind of rearranged things other ways and allowed that funding to go another direction as well. So they pretty much cleared that up. But if you have something more, tell me.
I'll read here, and we just found it on the web. So,
Yeah.
anyway, Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF, has filed an open brief in an appeal of a trial court's decision that upheld the state's alleged misuse of more than $14 million in taxpayer dollars. ADF, former Governor Bill Owens, former Senate candidate Jane Owen, filed a lawsuit against Planned Parenthood in Rocky Mountains because they violated the state constitution by using state funding to go to their abortion business.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that information, and I'll certainly try to follow up on that. I told you there were some answers. I didn't think I was going to. Any other questions, comments? Let's start over here then. Yes, ma'am.
My state representative was one of the co-sponsors for the murder bill and for the elderly. And she has promised that she will keep introducing that until it gets passed. So she's not given that. So, and we have, at least if it's any indication in the future, our local newspaper is really kind of subliminally encouraging this sort of bill to be passed. And last, I attended, it's probably been less than a year ago, I attended a meeting at PBH, sponsored by the ASCO Fund, that was very much supportive of euthanasia for the elderly. It was very scary.
It is very scary, and you're quite correct that just because the bill was killed this time, and fairly soundly too, but nonetheless, they'll come back and back, and yet, I would like us to seize the opportunities when these things come up, to teach people the difference, to show them what it means. Why is this a problem? And yes, I believe we need to counter what arguments they present. You know, as they say, I'm encouraged by what I saw happen this year in the House. I know that if they come and they start hammering and we don't point out the error of their ways, they will prevail. But I've got this silly notion that the truth shall set you free and that the truth will prevail. I don't want to sound you know, too idealistic, but I believe that we do need to see that we've got some opportunities here to keep working on it, and you know. Good enough. You must live on the east side of town. Yes, sir.
You mentioned earlier in our state law, section 5, or article 5, section
50.
50.
Well, it's the state funding of abortions. It doesn't outlaw abortions. It simply says state funds shall not be used directly or indirectly. And I always go with that, you know, include the indirectly part because they can play a lot of games with it. And I'm so grateful that ADF has jumped on what doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. So there's a hand in the back.
Why HB 1128 was passed this last week, the Colorado Women Protection Act, why that wasn't passed?
The Colorado what Act?
Colorado Women Protection Act, it was going to regulate abortion clinics from Colorado. Do you know
Because
what
it's
that is?
pro-life. Because it's pro-life. And I didn't read that bill this year very carefully, but it essentially, what it does is it takes an abortion clinic and gives it some standards for operating, and they push back at every level. And that's kind of a tough bill, too. I mean, I have sponsored those bills, but it's one of those that I really have to look long and hard at because I don't want to say, okay, here's how you can do your abortions more efficiently. But when you put some standards on there, you at least put a little extra scrutiny and start to tighten up the screws on it. Yes?
Yes, but the big argument is back alley abortions. If they're so worried about back alley abortions, why aren't they worried about what goes on in an abortion clinic?
Why the difference?
Yes, your point. Did everybody hear that?
Yes.
Her point was, why are they turning down a bill requiring reasonable medical standards for an abortion clinic when their argument against any regulation on abortion is to eliminate the quote back alley abortion argument that these abortions will occur regardless, and we're just driving it into a very dangerous circumstance. Well, I don't know how much more dangerous you can get to the child than the abortion, but it's very transparent. They want no control over abortion whatsoever. It's a mantra to some that is, you know, I mean, I don't even want to try to describe it further.
I guess the whole thing with me is they've been closing down clinics because of this, especially in Texas. A lot of abortion clinics have been closed down because they can't offer those types of standards in this clinic. So I think that's the big scare that, you know,
Well, and understand, I support every effort to limit abortion or stop abortion or make it clear that it shouldn't be done. You know, I'm actually committed to running a resolution honoring our crisis pregnancy centers around the state as well. We haven't put that together yet, but I'm hoping that we can make that so this year. And that's one thing that they really have a hard time saying no to, you know. And I love bringing that up because so many people who are proponents for abortion say, but you don't care about these children. They don't know. They don't know what actually goes on. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I don't want to get too far into the political part of it, but one of the reasons that a lot of people opposed abortion was because the idea is that a lot of abortion clinics have closed in Texas, but what's happened is it's more of the mom and pop abortion clinics are closed because they don't have the money to get up to par with the law in Texas. But now, Planned Parenthood is an monopoly in Texas, and so they have a mega clinic in Houston that is up to par with the laws in Texas, and they have another one opening in San Antonio who is also a mega clinic, and they are now up to par with the laws in Texas. And so the law really has no effect on the abortion industry because now it's really just a monopoly of Planned Parenthood, who now Planned Parenthood is getting funds through Obamacare, through state funds. You know, now it's legitimized. So it is difficult to not support a bill like that, but really whenever we're saying, and then you can kill the baby, then it's an issue.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on that. And to me, the real incremental steps, if that's what we're reduced to doing, are the ones that really do shut it down somewhere, like the unborn pain bill that I've filed, and it would essentially eliminate abortions beyond 20 weeks, except in some rare circumstances. It would tell Dr. Warren Hearn, you need to find a different state to live in. So, thank you very much. Well, okay, one quick question. I've probably got 60 seconds left.
That's all right. So a very short question, very off the wall. What, if anything, can someone in your office, for example, do to get more media attention when we have like a March for Life or 40 Days for Life, where we are publicly out there to have the media attention? Now, I know the media has their own way of doing things. What can be done to bring attention to what we're doing so the public does see it?
Well, the best I can say is each one of us does what we can. For example, you mentioned the March for Life, where several thousand, maybe 5,000 people or more were down at the Capitol. And that was on Saturday, and the next Monday or Tuesday when we had a floor action, it's like it didn't exist. Until I found a little slot where I could wiggle it into the debate and discussion, and I noted, last Saturday out on the Capitol we had several thousand people standing for life. And it gave me a little chance, and then some people printed up a card showing pictures of that, and we put it on every senator's desk and every representative's desk. So there are those of us down at the Capitol that are trying to continue to get the word out, and I'm one of those guys where a life issue comes up, the reporter will come and tap me on the shoulder, probably wanting some juicy, outrageous statement on my part so that, they can make a strange headline. And I try not to give them that, but I certainly tell them what life means and what the, law or the issue before us, how it intertwines with that. I go back to my beginning point. It's a good place for me to wrap it up. Is simply say, never give up. Please never give up. We need God's power and guidance and direction, but we also need our commitment to never give up. Thank you.
And one way we can keep up with things is to be on Senator's email list. I get updates from him, and you can do that as well. And we're so blessed to have someone fighting for us, a politician who does represent us. So that's very wonderful. And I'd like to introduce another speaker for you, and Father Stephen Voss. And he has spoken here before, and he's kind of back by popular demand. So please give a hand for Father Stephen.